Welcome to a tutorial about how to get started with Google Looker Studio. So if you're not too familiar with it, Google Looker Studio is basically the retitled version of Google Data Studios, which is a platform that lets you connect your Google Looker Studio platform to something like Google Analytics or something like Google Search Console or any other Google platform. And from there, you'll be able to make your own dashboards and reports that are customizable and a little more simple and easier to interpret than the actual platforms themselves. It's pretty good idea to use if you're sharing data from various data sources and you're sharing that to a bunch of different people. It's just a lot easier than copying a PDF and downloading it and putting it on an email and whatnot. So it's a much easier way to give people ways to manipulate date ranges and just look at data that they want to see and data that's important to them. So I'm going to quickly go through how to get there and how to set up your account and how to connect your data sources and really get started with creating a dashboard. So let's jump over to Google Looker Studio. Google Looker Studio looks like, as you can see here, I have a couple of reports already, but generally speaking, when you create the account for the very first time, you're going to see no accounts in here or no reports in here. So how you want to get here is you just want to open up your Google browser and just type in Google Looker Studio, and it should be the first thing that comes up at the very top, or one of the first few results. So you just look out for lookerstudio.google.com and you will be in the right place. Once you get there, make sure that you're signed into an account that has access to the platforms that you want to connect to. So let's say you want to connect to Google Analytics. Make sure that your email has administrator access to the Google Analytics property that you're connecting to. So once you have entered your Google Looker Studio report and you are signed in with the correct email, all you have to do is go ahead and click on the blank report button over here. There are a couple templates that you can use, and if you're just starting out, it might be a good idea to start looking at templates. But in this example, I'm going to start with a blank report so you can take a look at what the process is like. So the moment you click on a blank report, you will have the option to import data. Data is super important to import. It's probably the first step you have to do when you're creating a dashboard, because you can't really make a dashboard without data like this. So go ahead and select your data source. I am going to go ahead and select Google Analytics just because I think that's the most common thing that people are going to use. So let's go ahead and click on that. And I'm just going to look out for the Global Reach Google Analytics 4 property. Oh, of course, there's right there. So let's go ahead and click on that and add it to the dashboard. And that'll take a couple seconds here, but really it's inconsequential amount of time. So once that is added, it will load up a table. And from there, you'll be able to create a bunch of different reports. So over here, as you can see, it loaded in a couple of metrics over here. So this is using the dimension event name and the metric views. So it's looking at the metric followed by the views. So let's take a look at page views. We have this many views. And for button clicks, obviously, this metric doesn't really compete with button clicks. So this isn't a super great example of a default table to bring in. So I'm going to go ahead and backspace that and actually delete it just so we're starting from scratch. So one thing that's super important up here is the title of your report. So let's go ahead and start with that. Let's call this a tutorial report. It's important that you just title it whatever you think is best for your report. So I want to stick to a simple structure here. So for example, let's look at the page titles followed by the views that they're getting. So in that situation, I'm going to look over here at the right navigation here. So this is all of the dimensions that are available to me from my Google Analytics 4 property. So let's look out for page title. And we have a couple of examples here. I'm going to stick to the classic page title without the screen class. So I'm going to go ahead and go page title and drag it in here. So what I did was I just dragged the dimension in there. This does not have a metric. So an easy way of putting this is just the dimension is what you want to see, and the metric is the numerical version or the numerical equivalent that's attached to that dimension. So for page title, I want to look at how many views each page title has got. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Metric. and I'm going to type in views. And over here, this will add a brand new column. So views, as you can see here. So that makes a table. And you can add more than one of each. So for example, if I wanted to look at, let's see, something that's relevant. So let's get conversions. Here, it pulls up some conversions. Even if it's not incredibly relevant, like we don't have conversions set up on a lot of these pages, I think the only one with conversions integrated will be the contact us page. That's just one example of how you can use multiple metrics. So you can use as many metrics as you want. I typically use only a handful just so the report looks pretty simple. Because remember, the idea of Google Looker Studios is to simplify reports from the native platform. So if you're going to crowd it and make it as complicated as the original platform, it may not be the best use, especially if you're sharing it to an audience who isn't necessarily in tuned with reporting and with interpreting reports like this. So keeping it simple, especially if you're sharing it to a mass audience, is the way to go. So once you have your dimension and your metrics, I know I said I was going to stick to one metric, but since I have conversions in there, let's just stick to that as well. I'm going to go ahead and just spread this table out. Bring it to the middle here, and I can just change this to whatever I want it to be. You can make this as small or as big as you want. I don't really like the color associated with this table. It's gray, it's bland. So I'm going to go ahead and go to style and just pick something that's a little more poppy. So let's go ahead with blue. The Global Reach logo has a blue component to it, so we're going to just select blue. And I'm just keeping the text as black because that, in my opinion, is the easiest to see. So I want to think about how I'm going to share this to an audience. So if I'm sharing this to an audience, what's one thing that I'm going to need? And one thing I'm going to need is, a title up here, but also it's important to have something on the page itself that tells the audience what this report is about. So from there, I'm going to actually insert some text. So I'm going to go up here and click insert, and I am going to insert a text box. So I'm going to scroll down here. I see text. So I'm going to open this here. I'm just going to type in something pretty simple here. I'm going to call this the page title view and conversion report. And keep in mind that there are templates that you can use with Google Looker Studio, so you do not have to learn how to do this, but I think it's important to learn the basic conventions of what you can do with this platform. So over here, I'm going to make this text box a little more even for what it currently is. And I'm going to drag it to the center of the screen till I get that snap. And I'm going to make this smaller, and then I'm going to adjust the font size over here. Let's make it 32. Let's drag this out a little bit more. You know what? That font looks a little boring, so I'm going to actually go ahead and change that font as well. Let's change it to something like this. Keep in mind, I'm not going to go super heavy on the aesthetic purposes of support. The objective is to show you how to use this, not show you how to make a great report. Making a great looking report, visually speaking or aesthetically speaking, will take a little bit more refinement and a little bit more time. I just want to show you what you can do with the tools you have here. So I have a title over here, and one thing that I think is incredibly important, I know I said that for many for many of the pointers here. Well, one thing that's really important and that sets Google Looker Studios apart from just a regular PDF is the ability to manipulate date ranges. So if you send a PDF to someone, it's going to be just a hard-coded, hard copy. They can't do anything with that data. They can't really change that data, or they can't really get more insight beyond what the PDF is showing you. So what you can do is you can add a date range widget here. So down here, date range control under insert. So just click on that and drag this box out here. I usually keep it in the top right because that's where it is in Google Analytics. So I just think it makes sense to keep that consistency there. But generally speaking, if you're working with an audience who doesn't know how to use Google Analytics, you can probably put it anywhere you want and just draw more attention to it. So over here, we'll have the ability to select our date range. Let's look at February 1st to March 1st, and we can apply that, and that gives you the data that you want to see. So that is something that almost every report should have, in my opinion. So let's just drag this out and make this look a little better, look a little more consistent. So yeah, we'll go with that. That's how we can use it. So if you're sharing reports, another feature that will be pretty important is the ability to have multiple pages in a report. So what you have to do is you have to click Add Page over here, and as simple as that, it just adds a page for you. So one thing I think you should do is just make sure your pages are titled. So your entire report can be titled over here, but it's important to have each page title as well. So this is called page title and conversion report, not conversation. So page title views and conversions, I would highlight that, and I would just copy that under the manage pages feature. So let's click on this and change the name of the report here to manage pages, and let's put this in here. That's just an example of how to properly title your pages. So let's move on to this next page of the report, and I will quickly and briefly show you how to create a visualization. So let's take this same report over here. Let's copy this. Let's go to our next page. So let's say, title, column and row tables are pretty common and pretty easy to read. But let's say you want to venture beyond that and you want something a little more visually appealing. One thing you can do is you can use charts. So let's look out for a couple of different charts we can use. I'm going to drop this metric here, conversions. I'm going to keep it down to one metric just because charts look a little better with one metric. So let's bring this down and let's look at all the options we have. So one thing that could be important is looking at a donut chart. So let's take a look at that. And this gives us kind of a breakdown, a visual breakdown of what our most viewed pages are. So as you can see here, this page, how to resize and crop a picture with Windows, is accounting for a huge part of traffic, and we can see that reflected in a huge part of this donut chart. Oh no, actually no, this is others. This color would be probably down here. So the resize and crop image would be 5%. So that gives us a pretty good visual indication of what we can do with this. So that should give you a pretty good idea of how to start creating a report. My one biggest advice or piece of advice is to keep tinkering with it and keep playing with it, especially if you're going to eventually be sharing this report out to a lot of people. I'd highly recommend just looking through it and seeing what the report can do and just playing around with the design and finding the best meeting point between aesthetically pleasing, efficiency, and shareability and interpretability. Eventually, after some time, after some feedback and some time playing around the platform, you'll probably get to a point where you have the quote unquote perfect report. But generally speaking, there's always room for improvement. So I hope that this report is helpful to you, or this tutorial was helpful to you, and now you have the full ability to go ahead and make your own Google Looker Studios reports.